It's about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hello, my name is Leandro Facchinetti and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is to pick up where we left off yesterday. So just as a recap, in case you're new here, we are doing audio effects in REAPER using JSFX. So we are doing real-time audio processors. We are doing some effects, but we are also developing a library to help other people build their own effects. And we are getting close to having our first effect for real using the library. It is a little widget that helps you see the waveform as it comes across. And this will be useful when we have things like compressors, where we want to show the effect of the plugin in the waveform, show what the plugin does on the waveform. We are in the middle of abstracting some user interface utilities that we are developing. So we implemented something that works directly on this effect, and now we are abstracting that into the library for that to be reused. And that is something that allows you to hover over an interactive area. In this case, this little box where the waveform appears is the interactive area, and you're able to click and drag to zoom in. And right now it's broken, so that's something that we are going to fix today. But before we get there, I do want to address something else that I tried to do yesterday and I couldn't really, but now I think I will be able to. Okay, so let's see. So we are in the middle of this process of abstracting the notion of an interactive area, where an interactive area is, for instance, in this case, this square. And when you move your cursor on top of it, it should change state into a hover state. And when you double click, it should notice that the double click has happened in the interactive area, and so on. So there are all these states associated with the interactive area. And they are not mutually exclusive. You could be hovering, that's when you put your cursor on top. You could be, or the area could be active, and that happens when you hold down the mouse button. And you could even have hover without activation, so you just put your cursor here, but you don't click. You can click and drag in such a way that the area is active, but the cursor is not on top of it. So there are interactive areas that have the hover state on, the active state on, or both states on, or both states off. And there is also this other stage, the disabled stage, that we are not really using on this plugin, but since we started thinking about these states of an interactive area, it makes sense to disable the interactive area under certain circumstances. Not in this effect in particular, but in general, that's something that you probably would like. So I thought about just including it here. And then I tried to start writing the functions to update, and that's where I stopped. I got stuck yesterday, and we'll get unstuck today. So the way that we set hover and active is with this function, and it is responsible for detecting if the cursor is within the bounds of the interactive area, and to detect whether the cursor or the mouse button is down and that sort of thing. But there is also the disabled state. Again, we are not really using it, but we want to account for it. And the disabled state is not something that you can do or that you can check just by what events are happening with the mouse. This is something that some external code will want to enable or disable. Okay, so we have these auxiliary functions here. Oh, I guess I should explain how we are packing together all these states. This is a data structure, and we are not using our typical data structures. We have a facility for creating data structures, but we are not using that. Instead, we are using a bitmap. And the reason for that is that it's easier to allocate a number, so it's easier to allocate a bitmap than it is to allocate a proper data structure. We talked about this in depth yesterday, so I'm not going to repeat everything. But keeping that in mind, we are working with bitmasks because this is a bitmap. Hence the title of the stream, right? And I have these auxiliary functions to help you extract the information from the data structure. They are pretty much getters, so to speak. And they are hiding away the complexity of doing bit masking. So this is a way of taking or of making a mask that will reveal the hover position. So we shift by 0 positions, and that is not shifting at all. So this is just taking the rightmost bit of the bit mask, of the bitmap. Active is similar, and disabled is actually the same for getting. But while this function will be responsible for detecting mouse events and setting the hover and active states, as I mentioned, the disabled state is not something that you set by mouse events. It's something that your code, as user of the library, will set. So this is a setter. The other two don't have setters, but this one has a setter. So that's where I got stuck, because I couldn't really find a way to set this value. And I couldn't really find a way to set the values here on the bitmap as well here. So that's something that we will address right now. Bo is here. Hello, Bo. It's great to have you here. It's going well. We are going to talk about bitmaps, so it's always fun. How are you doing? I hope that you're feeling well. Let's start with this because it is going to be simpler than that. So how do we set a bit mask? Let's go over this step by step. This interactive area, which is a bitmap, it will have a shape like this. It will be something like 0, 1, 0, let's say. And that means that the hover state is off, the active state is on, and the disabled state is off. And suppose that you would like to turn this on. So you would like to turn this 0, 1, 0 into 1, 1, 0. In other words, you want to change this 0 into a 1 and preserve everything else. How can you do that? With a bitmap and with bitmasks. You can take the OR, typically represented with a vertical bar. So take the OR between the existing value, the current value of the interactive area, and this number. So 0 or 1 is 1. And if this was 1, 1 or 1 is also 1. So it really doesn't matter what was here. We are turning that bit on. In other words, we are enabling that state. We are setting that state on. Okay, so let's see. If disabled, right? If you want to set this on, now it can be kind of confusing because I am talking about the notion of disabling the interactive area, and that is the notion that we want to enable. So we are enabling the disabling of the interactive area. Yeah, I know it gets a bit confusing, but we'll power through this. So how do we set this on? We first want to take the interactive area, that's this value, and we want to OR that with this number. I, of course, could just type the number in. This is the number 4, right? This is in binary, so in decimal, it's the number 4. And I don't think there is a way for me to write binary in JSFX. I know that there is a way for me to write hexadecimal. There is a way even for me to write some other tricky numbers that we'll see in a moment. But there is no way for me to write binary. So I could just write 4 here. But instead, I'm going to do this bit, which is the same, right? I'm taking the number 1 and shifting it to the left by 2. So I shift it to the left once and shift it to the left twice. And I end up with this number that I can OR into the interactive area, and that will give me this result. Enable this bit, preserve the other 2. And tail and Fatis, we are all here. Hello everyone. It's great to have you all here. I appreciate your business. Thanks for coming. Yeah, Thursday stream is going to be awesome. So I am teasing this on Discord, and also I talked about it yesterday, but yeah, Tail accepted my invitation to come over the channel. So Tail is going to be our guest, and we'll be talking about analog modeling. So if you're into analog modeling, make sure that you catch Thursday's stream. Tail has a lot of experience doing this for Martinic, the instruments that he developed there, also some instruments for Arturia based on analog gear. And we'll be talking about his process, his method of inspecting a piece of gear, and in some cases, tracing the piece of gear manually, then simulating that in LT Spice, and then actually making a plugin that runs in real time. So lots of good stuff, not only for instruments either. You can also do this with compressors and equalizers and so forth that are analog pieces of gear that you would like to emulate. So looking forward to meeting Tail and talking about this on Thursday. Haven't looked at Spice since forever, but I still have a soft spot for analog modeling. Yeah, Spice is tricky business, but it can be a lot of fun. More about that on Thursday. And perhaps even next week. We will probably talk about analog modeling next week as well. But that's still up in the air so far. We'll see. All right. So this is how you set a bit on. How do you turn it off? So now let's think about the opposite case where I have perhaps the bit is on. We would like to set it off. The result we want is 0 because we want to set this off, and the rest we want to preserve. So whatever is here will be there. How can we do this? We can end with a 0 there, because no matter what, it can be a 1, it can be a 0, and 0 is going to be 0. So this is the way you can turn something off. And there is this nice duality where OR 1 turns something on and AND 0 turns something off, because OR and AND are kind of duals in the same way that 1 and 0 are kind of duals. So I like this relationship there. But to preserve the other bits, we can just put 1s there, because 1 and 1 is 1, and 0 and 1 is 0. So if we have a bunch of 1s, we will preserve the values. And with the 0, we can turn something off. So if we want to turn something off, in other words, if the disabled here is off, we want to take the interactive area and this number. How do we come up with this number? Well, think about the number that we put here before when we were ORing. We ORed 100, right? So this number that we are looking for right now is the complement of the number we had before. We just want to take the number we had before, which is this number, and we want to flip every bit so that 1 becomes 0 and 0 becomes 1. And then we end up with the number we want. How can we do that, you may be thinking? Well, in languages like C, probably JavaScript, probably many others, there is a simple way of taking a number and taking the complement of that number. It's this operator. It's the unary XOR operator. It has the effect of flipping every bit. Unfortunately, this is not available in JSFX. There is an XOR, but it's a binary operator, so it expects 2 arguments, one on the left and one on the right. So, how can we make this operation of flipping every bit with a single or with a binary XOR? Well, one way we can do that is by XORing, now with a binary operator, with a bunch of 1s. What? You may be thinking. Well, think about what XOR means. It's an exclusive OR. So 0 XOR 0 is 0. 0 XOR 1. So it's an exclusive OR in the sense of either one is true or the other is true, but not both. Okay, so that's the intent, that's the meaning of XOR. And this is the truth table for XOR, for binary XOR. So if one or the other is true, then the output is true, but if both inputs are true, then the output is false. In other words, if you are given, let's organize this like so. So given any bit, if you XOR with a 1, you get the opposite bit. 0 becomes 1 and 1 becomes 0. So this operation of XORing with 1 flips a bit. And if we XOR with a bunch of 1s, we are going to flip all the bits in this number. Okay, so we will take this number, which is this number. We will XOR that number with a bunch of 1s, and we'll get the number we want. We'll take this number, we will XOR that with a bunch of 1s, and we'll get the number we want. But this is, I'm fudging this, okay? This is not the real way you write a bunch of 1s. This will be interpreted in JSFX as a binary, as a decimal number. We want a bunch of 1s in binary. Luckily, the JSFX has a syntax, a piece of syntax for writing these kinds of numbers. So if you want a number in binary that is something like this, you can write in JSFX that number with this weird syntax where this is just fixed. That's the piece of syntax you have to write in JSFX. It's a weird combination of symbols that hasn't been used anywhere else, so that's what it means. And then the number of 1s that you want. Okay, so in this case, we actually want 3 number 1s because we have 3 fields. But what if we end up adding more fields in the future? I think it's safer if we future-proof this and give this as many 1s as possible. Because it will end up being used as a mask here, And the once will just mean preserve whatever was there, right? The ultimate thing we are going to do with this weird number we are writing down is ending that number with the current interactive area. So we will just preserve all the bits. Okay, so we can make this number as large as we want. I tested. JSFX does not complain. But it doesn't matter if you go beyond 53. You may recognize this as the number of significant digits on a 64-bit floating point number, according to the IEEE standard. But you can also just do what I did and play around with numbers until you got to 53, and that would be the largest one. Whatever. So we could use this. But I also noticed in the JSFX documentation that operations like binary XOR which I will find in a moment, converts both values to 32-bit integers. So I might as well just have 32 number ones in a row. And that's how I can write this sequence of digits that I had. So instead of this, I can write it like that. Now, that was a long explanation for a relatively short line of code. But that's because this line of code is short, but it's so convoluted. At least it is for me. When you see the end product, it is like, wait, what? What? What is this doing? That's why I explained all this to you, but also to myself. Yeah, okay, before I even try this out, let's recap. If we want to turn on the disabled bit, I will take the current value, I will OR with 1 followed by a bunch of zeros. That was this number. And if I want to turn off a bit, I will take the current value, I will end with that number, but flipped, so that the ones preserve the existing value and the 0 turns off a particular bit. And this is effectively a way of doing a unary XOR in JSFX, because it doesn't really have the notion of unary XOR. So if we do this, it amounts to the same. It is what it is. Tail is gonna correct me now. Okay, for what it's worth, you can also write hexadecimal and even characters. And then there is pi, etc., pi and phi and e. So $sign is used more in JSFX. Yeah, true. So this character alone means other things. This sequence of characters is reserved for this bit masking kind of thing that I haven't really seen anywhere else. I think that this is something that is particular to JSFX. I just lost another Plugin Boutique live stream contest. Oh well, next time. A friend of mine won mastering the mix. Okay. Okay. Sorry to hear that you lost the contest. Yeah. Is your submission available for people to listen to? I suppose that this, I don't know about this contest, but I suppose that this is as kind of a composition contest or a mixing contest or a mastering contest. So if your submission can be viewed by other people or listened to by other people, then let us know. I don't think you will be able to paste a link into the chat, but you can paste a link into the Discord channel, and people who are interested can go to the link in the video description, go to my website, and then go to Discord, and then go to the channel where we talk. All of us, people who are friends of the channel, and then we all can see Fati's submission. The general MIDI compatible JSFX synth you were making still in the works. Oh yeah. The syntax for writing hexadecimal is this, not that. This syntax is reserved for constants, and there are only 3 of them: E, pi, and phi. Oh, okay, it's just a raffle. You write something in the chat and then they pick a random winner. Okay, whatever. All right, when you get to this contest, then we can all listen to your submission. All right, so this is supposed to be working. I am not sure we will write a test for this though, because it is part of a block of code. It's part of a section here that isn't really easy to test. It's not really easy to test this bit because it requires mouse interactivity. And so I think I would just test this manually. And since I will be doing that, I think I will be just testing this manually as well. But let's go ahead and test this because it is tricky business. These lines are not trivial to look at. I think that maybe when you get used to writing a lot of bit manipulation, then this is going to be like, yeah, sure, of course, this is what this is doing. But when you just arrive at this line, you're like, hang on, what? In fact, there may be an issue in this line as I wrote it. It's lacking parentheses, and yesterday we saw that the order or the precedence of operators is not what I expected, and it's not similar to other programming languages, so I might as well have this parenthesis here. And I also put the parenthesis there just in case. I also think it helps communicate the intent, particularly because of the ternary operator and these operators, they are tricky. All right, how can we test this? Well, I think I'm just going to load the plugin and write some JSFX here real quick, and then we can look at the numbers. Yeah, that's what I will do. So, or perhaps I will even load a different plugin. No, I will do it here because there is a lot of context, like calling this function may be necessary and so forth. So let's just load the waveform plugin again and check this bit manipulation stuff. It will be under the GFX interactive area, and right now it's 0. And the function that updates this is not currently working, so when I hover, when I click, it doesn't register, it just stays at 0. But we can now call this with this interactive area and turn on this. So I haven't saved yet. This has not run yet. But I expect this number to change from 0 to 4, right? Because we are talking about the third bit counting from the right. So it's 1, 2, and 4. I expect this to turn into 4. Oh, I also need, and this is how you use this thing, I need to set the result. Second try, I'll save, and it became 4. Great. And if I change this back to false, I expect it to go back to 0. Okay, the manual test has passed, and manual testing is all I'm gonna do for this one. And I'm not 100% sure that we will be able to pull off the trick of using a bitmask here. Perhaps something will need something like a timer or something. Like, for instance, to detect double clicks, we needed a timer. This is a timer. In fact, I think I'm going to call it a timer. I'm not going to call it a stage. In any case, perhaps we will need things like timers, and then we will not be able to use a bitmask, but at least we figured how to do this in JSFX. There you have it. Let's rename the stage into, and just for the double click stuff, which starts here. So just in this section, we will rename stage to timer. Makes more sense to me. Yeah. Well, it was moved to C++, and it's turned into, oh, okay, so the plugin that Fossis was talking about here, the General MIDI JSFX synthesizer, is something that we covered in this channel. We talked about this with Dale way back in the beginning of the year, I think. And it's super interesting because it is multiple voices in a single plugin. Very cool stuff. And it seems like, okay, it's moved to C++ and it's turned into a sound module for this, which I don't think I know what that is. I will look it up later. Perhaps I will need to have the whole name. And I bet that it's going to be an old synthesizer. Yeah, looks like an old piece of gear, fun stuff. I don't know if it will ever see the light of day and if it will be open source, but it might. Okay. Okay, Roland Cloud. Is that like a cloud offering from Roland? I don't know what that is. You still have 29 bits, so you could probably fit a timer in there if you really want to. True, yeah. So the thing about a bitmap is that it is a data structure. You can pack information together in there. So we have 32 bits to work with because the bitwise operations, some of them, but not all of them, it's kind of weird. At least the documentation isn't clear about this. It is saying that it converts the numbers into 32-bit integers for XOR, but it doesn't say the size for AND and OR, so it could be that these are 64-bit integers or long unsigned integers and so forth. So whatever. Let's say that we are working with 32 bits. We can just organize these 32 bits in whatever way we see fit. I think that if we have a bitmap of flags, true or false, for each bit, it's okay. If we go beyond that, I think I will just go back into a regular data structure, but in theory, we could say the first 3 bits counting from the right are flags, and then we have 4 bits, which is a counter that can only go up to 16, and then we'll have another flag, and then we could have a counter. We could have anything in there, right? As long as we have some way of putting things in and getting things out, we should be good. And in this case, the way to get things in and out is these auxiliary functions. But yeah, as long as you're willing to do these shenanigans, you can pack at least as much as 32 bits of information in a single number. But the cost in terms of code complexity, I don't think it's worth it. Yeah, but it's interesting that you point this out because, yeah, it is true. But I don't think I will cross that bridge. All right, so now that we have this way of setting bits, in fact, I'm not really sure I'm going to follow through with this notion of bit masking and bit manipulation and bitmaps, even for just booleans, because it gets so tricky. I don't really love this line. But now we have it in case we need it in the future. Anyway, let's see how we are going to do the interactive area updating. Right now, this function is not complete and it's not really working. It is being called the right way. So I think that as soon as we get this function implemented, we will be able to run the plugin. No, we also have to adapt the uses of JSFX hover and whatnot. But let's start by doing the function first, and we should be able to see values updating over here on the debugger. So hover and active are the two flags that we will want to set or unset. Well, perhaps it makes sense for me to extract this notion of setting and unsetting, or turning on and off, this notion of turning on and off a position in a bitmap. If I extract this, it can be used down here as well, because I will want to set and unset flags over there, so might as well, right? And once we have so many function calls, because I'm abstracting away the complexity of bit manipulation, I think that all the performance benefits of using bitmaps goes out the window. But I still think that there is an advantage of usability. It is easier to just make something up like a number and update it in place. It's conceptually easier than having to go to the init block, allocate a chunk of memory, and so on. So far, I think it will pay off, but I'm about to change my mind. Anyway, let's do this extraction just over here, whatever. I will probably move it up and perhaps even write tests for it. But it will be bitmap set, and there will also be bitmap get. Now we are more in the data structures territory. We'll have a bitmap and an index, and here we'll have a bitmap and an index and a value. The logic to get something is this. We just need to rename some variables. And the logic to set is that we just need to rename some variables. And now because the variable names are shorter, it fits in a single line. And I love how this line is just barely readable. It looks like Perl, the programming language. It's a low blow. If you know Perl, you're probably laughing. If you don't know Perl, go learn about it, because it's a beautiful language. It's a beautiful language. And probably we should be able to write tests for this, automated tests. So tests as a to-do. And also move this up with other data, not database. I was about to write database, data structures. And I think that we'll keep this, even if we end up not using it for this context, because this is generally useful. All right. It could even be used here. But because the documentation in JSFX also actually gives you these numbers, I will leave these as is. Oh, And I missed parentheses on these guys. Well, they are all gone, aren't they? Because now I have this general thing that I can just use. So I don't think it makes sense to have a function like this just to delegate to the bitmap get. So I will just get rid of these functions. And even that function can go away. And then it doesn't really make sense for me to namespace the fields like that. Yeah, I'll go with this. Roland Cloud is a subscription service. Yeah, okay, as the name suggests. They give you access to all their synths, but I'm not a fan of that. Yeah, neither am I. Their general MIDI plugin, Roland Sound Canvas VA, sounds very good, but has a terrible graphical user interface. You can still get an older version for free bundled with Cakewalk. Yes, I installed an entire DAW just to get that. Yeah, Cakewalk is something you can install for free these days, I think. By the way, your getters are not true booleans because they are not returning 1 for true. Hang on. Why do you say that a true boolean is 1? Anything that is not 0 is a true boolean, as far as I'm concerned, right? Well, we are splitting hairs here, and it's more like if a tree falls and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound kind of thing. But I would say that anything that is not 0 is true and not just 1. And I do realize that if you are trying to compare with something that is a boolean equals to true, then this can be tricky, right? You should be comparing it's not false. But still. And Tails' point for people who are not in the weeds here is that this notion of getter will, for instance, for the disabled stage, say that your interactive area is 110, for instance, okay? Continuing with the example from before, this getter will not return 001, which we are calling true in our library. This function will return instead 100. This will evaluate to true and it will behave as true in any conditional, but it's not the same as this version of true. If we wanted, we could do this operation in another way. We could take the original number, shift it to the right by index. So in this case, the index is 012. It would shift to the right by 2, which would put, when it shifts to the right, it just takes out this last element and puts a 0 on the left once and twice. And then we would get a number with a 1 here, but there could in theory be more 1s to the left. So instead of this number, we could be working with this number. So there would be another 1 in there. So we would shift to the right by index, and then we would end with 1 in this order, but I don't think I need parentheses. But anyway, I would put parentheses. And this is guaranteed to give us, it's essentially a mask at this point, and it's guaranteed to give us a true. The number of operations is the same, 1 end and 1 shift. So I do see the point of making this be just the number 1 that we are calling true. Yeah, I'll do it this way. I'll take I'll take that. I will do it that way. So it is bitmap, right shift index and 1. Whoops, I bumped into the microphone. But over here, nothing has to change because this is the setter. But now I really need to test this because I am not 100% sure that this is going to work. So perhaps we will just do the things I'm saying here, and today's stream will just be about bitmaps. What a fun topic. Confusingly, the older version was called Virtual Sound Canvas, and it's now called TTS1. Okay. It went from Virtual Sound Canvas to Roland Sound Canvas. Yeah, confusing. Cakewalk comes with some interesting DirectFX effects and synths, which Reaper can load. Interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, I like Perl too. When I went out of college, when I graduated, I didn't drop out. When I graduated from college, my first job was writing some Perl. So I cannot complain. I made some good money as an intern using Perl. I'm too scared to even touch Perl. Don't be scared. It is a very robust language with an awesome library in the sense of not the standard library, but the third-party libraries. Lots of them. You can do so much. And it even inspired other libraries in other languages because it has been around for so long. Great stuff in the Perl community. It's also a good community. There are lots of knowledgeable people that are down to earth, not people who would make you feel bad about yourself. So it's a great community to be part of. But I haven't written Perl in the last 10 years, so I guess you can convert by doing that. True, this is an old party trick to take any number and convert it into a Boolean. And it does that by negating the number twice. When you negate any number, it becomes either a 0 or a 1. And when you negate it again, you will get back to either true or false, whatever you started with. But it will be the true Boolean, so to speak. But yeah, this is nicer and more efficient than Dash. I don't think it's nicer or more efficient than what I wrote before, but I agree that it is giving me a true Boolean, so to speak, and that you can compare the output of bitmap get with true, which can come in handy depending on what you're doing, because sometimes you have variables that can be true, false, or something else, like perhaps true, false, or undefined, right? So being able to do this kind of comparison is a nice thing. All right, we're biting the bullet, and today will be about bitmaps. Let's move this up and write some tests, and then I will be confident that I got this right. So let's find where we have some data, not database, data structures. The circular buffer is definitely a data structure, but I think that our bitmap can be way up because it's a much simpler thing that doesn't even depend on memory. We have image allocation, array, circular buffers. I put it here. Is bitmap a single word or 2 words? What does it look like on Wikipedia? Often spelled bitmap. On Wikipedia, it's a single word. Bitmaps. And bitmap test. So let's write some examples for get. If our bitmap is 110, what is 110? That is the number 2 plus 4, 6. At index 0, that's this guy right there, that should be a 0. And at index 1, that should be a 1. And at index 2, that should be a 1. And at index 3, well, there is an implicit 0 here. There are implicit zeros up to 32 bits. So if I ask for position 3, I should get back a 0. And see how now I'm comparing to zeros and ones here? This comparison wouldn't work if I had the previous implementation. But this works because I am doing the true booleans, right? So yeah. Perhaps I could even be using true and false here. Or whatever. I'll just keep these as zeros and ones. Now, what happens if I take this number and I set bit 2, I guess I will set bit 0. I'll set bit 0 to 1. Then the output should be this. And what is that number? That's the number 7. So I'm setting this position to 1. Now I will do the same for positions 1, 2, and 3. So in this case, in these two cases, I will be setting this position and then that position to 1, so the number will not change, and we will in fact end up with 6. But in this case, we are turning that implicit 0 into a 1, so we will end up with 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. So there will be one more 1 to the left here. And what is that number? Well, that is 2 plus 4 plus 8. It's 14, isn't it? And I think that that covers setting bits to 1. Now let's set bits to 0. Well, setting position 0 to 0 will not change the number. We'll continue with this 6. Setting position 1 to 0 will turn the number into that. And that number is the number 4. Then setting the second position to 0 will end up with this number, and that's the number 2. And setting the third position to 0 will give us this, which is the number 6 again, just written in a different way, with one extra 0 to the left. I think that this covers every case in the function, and perhaps even more, right? We are covering the case of ones twice. I don't know why, but we are. Now let's see if this test is passing. And it is. Now, this is not something you see every day. First try. Great. Dreamer is here. Hello. It's nice to see you here. Any of you tried using JSFX inside Carla? A Cardinal plugin? Yeah. Font is tried, I think. I haven't. But I do have Cardinal. Um, oh, nice. Thank you. But those plugins are not the best in terms of like coding standards and whatnot. But I think that they are at least not using the latest features in JSFX. The plugins that are available on my repack are not using the latest in terms of JSFX features. So the thing that we are developing now is using the latest features, which means the things that we're developing now may break under different hosts. Wait, how do you give that plugin? I don't know how to pronounce this. Aldial? I don't know. Ah, okay. All right, we wrote auxiliary functions to work with bitmaps. And now that we have that, we can try to finally write this function. Let's see if we can get this. I don't think we will need those variables, actually. We can just take the interactive area and bitmap set the hover state to the result of this big computation. We don't need to go over what the computation does or how it works. Well, what it does is clear. It is detecting whether we are hovering. And it's quite straightforward if you look at it. It's just looking at the boundaries, but we'll not explain everything that is going in here again, because I did that yesterday and on Monday. Or yesterday and on Friday. I think I explained this in 2 different days. So this is setting the interactive area to be... I'm updating the hover stage in there. And let's update the active stage in there. With this formula. Oh, hang on. I just realized something. This hover is depending on that. So I think I might have the local variables in that case. Strictly speaking, I will need the previous active stage in here. I will not need the previous hover stage. It will just be overwritten, but for good measure, I will get it anyway. It's just a bit manipulation and a function call. It should be fast enough. It's running in the JFX block. It should be fast enough. So I will just do this thing. And it's similar to what we did in other functions. For instance, the waveform display. We start by getting stuff from the data structure, we manipulate stuff, and we write stuff to the data structure. We are following a similar pattern. We are getting stuff from the data structure. We are updating stuff. And then we are updating the data structure. And this assignment will also be the return of this, which will be assigned to there, so that will just fall through and work. I'm not in love with how this looks, but it is what it is. Let's review to see if this still makes sense. We have the coordinates, we extract stuff from the data structure, and later we will set stuff into the data structure, and here we are updating that. I will just briefly read this to see if it makes sense. We are within bounds, yes, and we are getting into the active stage. If the hover is true, in other words, the cursor is on top of the thing and we have just clicked the left button of the mouse, or if we were active before and we are still holding the left button on the mouse. And I noticed that I'm using the left button of the mouse, and I could have some notion of active that is related to other mouse buttons or even to keyboard modifiers. So I could have like an active with a control holding down, an active with the right button of the mouse being pressed. So perhaps this abstraction will not be the best. We'll see. Or perhaps we will need to pass more arguments here, like I just want to activate with a different button, or I just want to activate with a different keyboard modifier or something. Or maybe even this whole notion of updating everything in one place will not fly, and we'll need to have a function to detect collision and a function to detect activeness. I don't know. What is that supposed to be? Would like to try these more advanced features. They're not like super advanced. They are mostly just new. They're new, but they are not advanced. They are things like showing and hiding a slider conditionally. So in this case of the waveform display, when I turn on the grid, some more sliders appear. It's not advanced, but it's new. So depending on the host, it may not work. I don't know, haven't tried. Would be interested in knowing if it works. So if you want to try, let me know. It doesn't support any of the graphical features yet. Oh, so that's a deal breaker for me, I think. My main objective with this library is to have these sorts of graphical user interfaces. So I'm not terribly interested in that right now. I can do it on Windows. I guess it's not supported, just as Carla's cardinal features are not supported on Windows yet. Okay. Yeah, Carla and Cardinal are developed by a person who is working on DPF, right? And that is mostly for Linux, as far as I understand. It is multi-platform, but it's mostly for Linux. I mean, the main supported plugin formats are the Linux ones, like LV2, for instance. Okay. I will at least get this to work with this abstraction, and then later we'll find that this abstraction doesn't cut it. But for this plugin, I think it will be good enough, so let's try it. We are updating this interactive area, so I will just change the hoovers, and there are 3 of them. I will change them into bitmap get from the interactive area the hover stage. and where it says JSFX active, I will get the active state. With that, we should be back into a working state. Let's see how this code reads. You start the JSFX section. You call this library function that does all the setup, including detecting double clicks and so on. Then you update interactive areas based on mouse events like clicking and double clicking and so on. Then, if the interactive area is active, then I will change the zoom based on the difference, and I will also constrain that. Perhaps I will do it in a single line. No, I will do it in two lines. First, I will update it, then I will constrain it and quantize it. Then, if I am hovering and I just double clicked, then I will reset the zoom. So I like how this reads so far. Update the notion of the active area, the interactive area, then use that notion to do stuff. Oh, this to do can go into the library part of things. Specifically, it can go in here. Well, somewhere in there. Perhaps I will just put it there. So after having handled all of this, which essentially is a glorified slider block, right? It's a slider block in disguise here. Anyway, after having done that, we have all the sliders in the way that we need them. And then we can start drawing. Some of the drawing depends on the state of the interactive area. Namely, we want to draw some highlight on the interactive area. So we ask, are we hovering? Are we active? If so, then let's take a particular color, which depends on whether we are active or hovering. Yeah, like that. It reads well this way. Take the color and draw a rectangle to highlight the interactive area on hover or on active. Then the drawing of the waveforms will not change, but oh, I was gonna say that we find some other places where it depends on the state of the interactive area, but no, it does not depend on the state of the interactive area. So there you have it. This should be working. And we'll try it. Yeah, we'll try to prove that this is working, but first I want to comment on something. And that is, if I have this zoom variable, right now it can be controlled by a slider, and it will be able to be controlled over here by clicking and dragging. Yeah, so we might as well just try this, and then I will do the comment that I wanted to do. So now this is back into a working state. When I put my cursor, it highlights ever so slightly. I can click and drag, and it moves around, and I can double click, and it resets. Great. Everything is working. Let's commit what we have. Today is a lucky day. Everything is just working. I am so happy. Anyway, so I think that in this case, it does make sense to have the slider showing as well as this, but perhaps we would want to not show the slider and just have this it would also stand to reason that we would just have this be clickable and interactive and not really display the slider. So at that point, you may be thinking, well, why bother making it a slider at all? Why don't we just have this variable? And yeah, we could just have this variable. So what is the issue? Why do we bother having a slider for values that we can interact with via the user interface? I have a couple reasons. These sliders may be hidden. For instance, these sliders are hidden, right? So you can hide sliders, but they are accessible via the params, FX parameter list, and then you can control stuff, even stuff that is hidden. For instance, this duration gap is hidden right now, but you can control it from automation. You can control it from MIDI. Maybe you have an actual slider to control that. And you can control that with automation on the track as well. That's what this is about. Not really useful for this effect, but it's useful in general. And the most important thing is, if you save the project, close REAPER, and reopen, the sliders will be kept in the project automatically. The sliders is just remembered by REAPER and by the JSFX engine that runs in REAPER. So the sliders, you can, for free, they will remember their state. If you create an effects chain, not like this though, whatever. If you create an effects chain, the slider positions will be remembered. If you create a track template, the slider positions will be remembered. But if instead of having a slider, I just had a variable, that would not be remembered. And that's why I use sliders for this variable. In this case, I think it also makes sense to have this as a slider, but I just wanted to comment on this. And if you want to have a variable that you want remembered, and you don't want it to show up, you can have a hidden slider for that variable. If you need too many variables, then you will run into a limitation. You can only have up to 64 sliders. And perhaps there are things that you would not like to expose as parameters that you could automate, maybe not even hidden ones. For whatever reason, you just want to hide them completely. And there is a way for you to do that and still have the values be remembered by REAPER when you close and reopen the project, or when you create an effects chain and so forth. And that is to use the serialize block. So far, we are using the serialize block for storing the version, and for very weird reasons, like the number of channels is unavailable in the init block unless you have a serialize block. But the serialize block also serves the purpose of storing arbitrary variables within your project or effects chain and so forth. Just wanted to point that out, that we have a slider and it makes sense in this context, but you may want to have even hidden sliders just to get this for free behavior of storing values when you create effects chain or save a project and so forth. And when that doesn't cut it, you have to deal with the serialize block. Okay, LV2 is a cross-platform plugin format. True, but it is mainly used in Linux as far as I understand. And there are some other formats that I think are exclusive to Linux, and that DPF targets those formats mainly, like this one. Well, perhaps it's multi-platform, I didn't know that. Anyway, you don't tend to find many plugin developers who publish this format for macOS. I have never found one. I thought that this was Linux only. I think that the L stood for Linux in there. Whatever. Should work on Windows too, at least the code tries to look in the same location. I have no idea where that would be on Windows. Get special path. Well, it should be special. You could always install REAPER and see where it creates a directory. Oh, that I know. I know where the REAPER folder is on Windows. I bet that Fotis knows as well, but you can easily go on Windows and go to Options and show resource path in Explorer Finder. But it's also under App Data Roaming something something. You could always install Reaper. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have it. It's all in the default folders, App Data Roaming. Oh, there you go. But that weirdly named plugin doesn't know about it because it looks in a different location. So I don't know. It's not that it isn't supported, but it just needs a different configuration, maybe a symbolic link, file a bug report. Oh, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it is a nice interactive little thingy. Looking forward to put this to use in my auto mixer, which will be the next thing I do with this. All right, anything else that we want to do today? I think I delivered what I promised. We worked with bitmaps and we finished extracting the notion of interactive areas. This is fully working. So perhaps I will just take care of this because it's so quick. Hopefully it's quick. I think I'll just finish this and then we'll wrap it up. When using the mouse wheel, we can read positions. I will give these positions a meaningful name. And then we should clear by setting that to 0, and the library will do that. Perhaps not here though, because this is dealing with mouse events, and this is more like mouse state, not mouse events. And we are capturing the mouse state up here, for instance. Yeah, I think that this is the proper place. We are capturing the position of the mouse, we are capturing the state of the buttons, we are capturing the state of the wheel. And here we are dealing with events like the button has just been pressed or had just been released. Perhaps I could have an event to say the wheel has just been scrolled. Yeah, I will do that. It doesn't hurt. So I'll call this the wheel has just been scrolled. We are not using the past tense. We are using, I think, the infinitive, right? Scroll and, well, up and down are not really verbs, are they? Yeah, we don't have a precedent, but I will call it scroll. And that is just if the mouse wheel is not 0. It can be negative, it can be positive, depending on whether you're scrolling up or down. And same for the horizontal wheel. Let's investigate if this is working on the debugger. So we are interested in these 4 variables. I will only test the vertical one because I don't have a horizontal wheel. Well, my mouse doesn't have a horizontal wheel, but if I hold down Shift, then it registers as horizontal scrolling. So when I start scrolling, I can see that this scroll event becomes 1 or true. Not always, I have to get lucky, but it does work. And if I scroll up, then the number becomes positive, and if I scroll down, the number becomes negative. So that seems to work. And I'm going to hold down Shift, and that works as well. Great. That worked first try too. I was so lucky today. Great. So yeah, that's all for today. Thank you, Fotis and Dreamer and Tail and Bo for joining me on the chat. Tomorrow we have a meeting of the C++ Digital Signal Processing Juice study group. And on Thursday, we will have Tail to talk to us about analog modeling. So look forward to that. And oh, and thank you. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I am sorry. I will try though. Orwa Garaibe. Thank you for being here. I see you tomorrow for the study group meeting. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.